Testing.
Good morning, Hector. We can hear you clearly. Thanks.
Good morning. Perfect. Thank you. Quick question, Brian. Was the slide that I present on updated to remove those bullet points? Perfect. Thank you.
Good morning, all. Thanks for this public workshop today. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes for folks to have a chance to join, but wanted to let you know we'll be starting shortly. Good morning, all. Thanks for joining the AHSC Round 10 Guidelines public workshop. I think we can go ahead and get started on this call. So just wanted to go over initially a few housekeeping things, and then we can jump into the meeting. My name is Lisa Answategi. I work as the Senior Program Manager for the Strategic Growth Council AHSC program. Um, and just for housekeeping, note that the chat is disabled because this is a webinar, but we do want as much engagement and questions and feedback from you all as possible. So please feel free to use the Q&A chat feature to ask any questions at any point during this presentation. Our team will be responding in real time to any questions. And then as a reminder, these questions will form part of the Q&A document that will be released with the NOFA. I also wanted to flag that this meeting is being recorded and may be posted publicly, so just for awareness and consent to public posting. Um, and then the workshop will be ending at 11:30 a.m. We anticipate having a good amount of time for Q&A, discussion, and feedback in the workshop. And we'll have several folks presenting from SGC team as well as HDC and HCD and CARB. I just ask if you all can present yourselves as you speak so folks can get to know new faces. And as well as participants for the Q&A portion at the end, please be sure to introduce yourself. So just as a brief overview and introduction of the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, or AHSC, this is California's largest state-funded program dedicated to integrating affordable housing and sustainable transportation with the aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. AHSC funds affordable housing projects that bring housing, jobs, schools, and daily destinations closer together, making it easier for residents to walk, bike, and take public transit rather than rely on personal vehicles. This helps California meet its climate and equity goals while improving community health, mobility, and quality of life. AHSC is funded by Cap and Invest auction proceeds and administered by the Strategic Growth Council. And it's implemented and advised by our key partners, the California Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, as I mentioned earlier, and the California Air Resources Board, CARB, creating a climate with the aim to create climate-friendly communities across the state. Just to toot our own horn a little bit, through all 9 rounds, AHSC has invested a total of $4.6 billion to projects across California. Over 15,000 homes have been constructed and over 4.5 million metric tons of GHG have been avoided. And approximately 70% of all the funds has been invested in disadvantaged communities. For today's agenda, we will provide a bit more details on the program, share key dates and program timeline, summarize the key changes that are being proposed from round 9 to round 10 guidelines, summarize the role of the AHSC GHG benefits calculator tool, and then allow for dialogue and questions and answers at the end. So for an overview of the AHSC program, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Brianne.
Everyone, thanks so much, Lisa. My name is Brianne Logasa. I'm a senior planner at SGC, working on the AHSC program. I'm just going to jump into an overview of AHSC overall. So Lisa, feel free to go on to the next slide. I'll start with kind of the basics of what does AHSC fund. As the name suggests, we fund affordable housing, both rental and home ownership. And for our housing, a minimum of 20% of the total units must be income restricted. However, our most successful applicants do have 100% affordable housing projects. And aside from the direct housing costs, we also fund housing-related infrastructure, or HRI, which includes infrastructure improvements that are required as a condition of approval, on-site energy storage, factory-built housing components, sewer trash, things that are kind of necessary for the development of the building itself. Additionally, we also fund sustainable transportation infrastructure, or STI, and that includes pretty much everything under the sun related to transportation, whether that's ways to make the ride or the pathway that you're going on more efficient or faster, or just the amenities to make a ride more comfortable. So that includes things such as the transit vehicles, bikeways and sidewalk repairs, or new construction of bikeways and sidewalks, bus shelters, lighting, urban greening, curb ramps. So yeah, basically, if it's related to transportation, it probably falls under STI. And then last but not least, we also fund a variety of community programs such as active transportation programs, tenant legal counseling, anti-displacement programs, air pollution reduction programs, and workforce development programs. All right, I think we can move on to the next slide. So as Lisette mentioned earlier, AHSC is funded by the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, also known as CAP and Invest. We've listed kind of our examples here of the funding we've had available for past rounds. And for round 10, which we're discussing today, we have about 550 million of auction proceeds accrued for fiscal year 24 to 25. So a little bit of a decline, but we're still expecting to be able to fund a lot of amazing transformative projects. And just to make sure they are transformative and meaningful projects, we do set minimum and maximums for funding requests. The minimum request is 10 million with a maximum of 50 million. And that cap can be broken down even further by between housing and transportation. So we have a cap of 35 million for housing, and the max for transportation is 15 million. There is one exception to this minimum and maximum, though. For our tribal entities applying to AHSC, the minimum is reduced to 1 million. So instead of 10 million, tribal entities can apply for $1 million programs. Now, before moving on, I do want to point out the image on the right-hand side of the slide. I just love this image so much because it depicts the quintessential AHSC project community. This community here in the image has affordable housing, urban greening, bus service and transportation amenities, safe and accessible sidewalks, really the works and just everything that we love at AHSC. So this is sort of just our vision for AHSC projects. Anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to our partners at the Department of Housing and Community Development to discuss the AHSC project threshold requirements.
Thanks, Brianne. My name is Hector Leyva, and I'm one of the two section chiefs here with the Department of Housing and Community Development, otherwise known as HCD. We oversee the programs in our Climate Investments branch, which is the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Program, the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program, and the Transit-Oriented Development Program. Today, we're discussing AHSC, and AHSC is very unique in that it's very complex. As it has scoring components, that makes it a competitive program. So there are three phases of review that go into the AHSC program. The first is threshold, the second is scoring, and the third is feasibility, making sure that project is feasible and ready to be go forward. So we're going to discuss project threshold today. The first component I want to discuss, is the demonstration of site control. And what we're looking for here is that the sponsor applicant with the experience or any of the co-applicants that are listed on the project have site control of the site that the proposed housing is going to be built on. That can be demonstrated through any fashion, including purchase agreements, lease agreements, or agreements with your locality, like an exclusive negotiating agreement or a DDA. Any one of those can be demonstrated and used to show that site control through the award date. One of the things we want to emphasize is typically we don't see those agreements in the name of the sponsor or applicant. It's usually an affiliate or some controlled entity, including that limited partnership that's going to be ultimately the borrower and holder of those assets. If that's the case, you need to submit documentation during a threshold that would be reviewed. Well, it would need to be submitted at the time of application that would be reviewed at threshold. And it would need to show and evidence a connection to your sponsor. It's very important to emphasize that because that's typically one of the main things that we see applicants and sponsors not provide. We want to make sure that we see that connection to the entity that's in the site control documents. The second component that we want to discuss today is developer experience and capacity. Experience is attributable to two same size, scale, and scope projects that have been built and are in operation in the previous 10 years prior to the application due date. So with our expected application due date of late April, early May, that means you have to have a project April, May of 2016 to now that has been built and is in operation and controlled by you. Some of the things I want to clarify and expand on related to experience: you can't use the experience of an affiliate. You can't use the experience of a principal, and that's due to the complexity of the AHSC program. It's not just the housing that's getting built, but that includes the transit, the infill, and those community programs that Brianne mentioned. The second attributable factor to developer experience is capacity. We want to make sure that you demonstrate you have the staffing, payroll, and ability to build these projects. That capacity can't be relied upon by a third party or consulting services. It's got to be the actual developer that demonstrates that. And then the third reason, it's essentially that developer who demonstrated that experience, who has that capacity, is the entity that the department's going to look for to be in control of the project once it's built. That's where our regulatory agreement and our loan documents go into play, and what we monitor for. We want to make sure that we have whoever it was that demonstrated that experience in the past, has the ability to build it, is in control of it in the future. Another factor that we're going to look for is that there's no active or pending litigation to any of the developers, any of the co-applicants, or any of the other parties connected to the project, as far as the borrower structure or possibly even the localities or jurisdictions if there's MOUs. AHSC, as a multifamily program, is a permanent lender. So we want to make sure that you have all the committed funding sources possible that would also allow you to gain points as a scoring opportunity. There are going to be instances where you don't have some of that funding committed, such as tax credits or bonds, but all the other items that are listed in that capital stack, we want to make sure that you have some sort of either commitment from them or ways to demonstrate that you're going to be able to obtain that funding, even potentially in the future, like demonstrating what NOFA it is that you're going to apply to or what funding cycle or program you're going to apply to. AHSC is a gap lender, and that's the reason we are looking for that funding threshold. As far as discretionary land use approvals, there's two things related to this. The first is the land use form that's located in the application. That's going to allow the locality or jurisdiction that you're in, that you're proposing to build the housing on, to identify what type of discretionary land use you have available. It could be SB 35, it could be discretionary, it could be an application that's been submitted. That locality or jurisdiction you're in, probably their planning department, is going to sign off on what you are doing and what's eligible in that community. The second part of that is related to the California Environmental Quality Act. What we're looking for there is to see if you're entitled, if you have some sort of exemption, or if you are required to have an environmental impact report. Whatever route is identified related to CEQA, that documentation needs to be submitted at the time of application, along with that form and any other supporting documentation needed. AHSC, along with all of our other multifamily programs here in the state, are required at this time to use an all-electric design, meaning there is no opportunity or allowance to having any sort of natural gas connections. And then last on this slide is related to internet service as well as transit passes. That's required to be provided to each assisted/restricted unit for the first 3 years. We do have PGM component that Brianne spoke to earlier that has an allowance that is an eligible cost that can be used if necessary for both that internet service and the transit passes. Next slide, please. All right. I will speak to the last bullet point here, and I believe our partners at SGC or CARB will speak to the first two. So the third bullet point is related to what is required to be put into the application as far as requesting for funding. So typically what we see and require per the guidelines, you have to have at least one housing component and or one infill component. So you can have AHD or HRI or both, but you have to have at least one of those. And you have to have an accompanying STI, which is the transit. So at most, you can have 4 components, including the PGM. At minimum, you can have 2, like an AHD STI or an HRI STI. It all depends on what you and how you structure your application. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to our partners at SGC. It looks like Brianne.
Jump in here. So some other kind of transportation related threshold items, if you will, are that in order for a project to be eligible, you have to have existing qualifying transit or high quality transit within a half mile of where the affordable housing development is going to be. And we have different rules for what qualifies as qualifying transit versus high quality transit. So I definitely recommend you check out the definitions in our guidelines to see that laid out for you all. And then also you just have to have documentation that your project is sort of meets the goals of your region's sustainable community strategy. So we have a template that we provide as part of the application that you would work with your COG or your MPO to make sure you're in alignment with them. And that, I think, covers most of our thresholds. So we'll pass it on to the next group.
Hi, folks. My name is Ella Manishill. I'm also a planner with SGC, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our scoring criteria and our awards process for the AHSC program. So I guess I'll start with saying that AHSC is a competitive program. We award projects based on highest score, and our scoring is based on a 100-point scale. No project is really ever expected to get 100 points. I don't think one ever has, but there are 100 points available in total. Of those 100 points, 30 points are allocated to our GHG reduction scoring. And this is where applications will show the extent to which they reduce, excuse me, their project reduces GHGs. So that includes, housing components, transportation components, and then that scoring category is scored relative to other applicants. So there's no specific threshold that you need to meet to get a certain number of points. It's all scored relatively to other applications that round. And then our largest scoring category is the quantitative policy scoring category, which is worth 50 points. And this is where SGC identifies a number of policy priorities, and we give points out to applications that help us meet those priorities. So there's a wide range of topic areas. I really recommend going to the guidelines if you want to see the details. But some highlights are our sustainable transportation infrastructure points, which give points for improving sustainable transportation infrastructure, like bikeways, walkways, public transit, things like that. We also give points to the proximity of key destinations to the housing development. So, if there's medical offices, grocery stores, community parks, things like that close to the housing site, you get points for that. We give points for anti-displacement programming, for workforce development programming. There's a number of incentives there. And then our last scoring category is the narrative-based policy scoring, which is worth 20 points. And that is That's really the applicant's opportunity to provide context around the project, especially, the engagement that's happened for the project thus far, the environmental context surrounding the region, all in a narrative-based format. So it's really your chance to tell us the story and show us the work that's gone into the project thus far. I think that covers the scoring categories. Next slide. Okay. So, in addition to scoring or awarding projects based on highest score, we also award projects based on several goals that are set by our statute as well as our council. They're all listed on the slide here. We give 35% of each round's funds to transit-oriented developments, 35% to integrated connectivity projects, and 10% to rural innovation project areas. And there are definitions for all of those project types in our guidelines if you're curious where your project falls. And then we also are required by statute to designate at least 50% of our funds each round to disadvantaged communities as identified by Cal EnviroScreen. At least 50% of our funds must go to housing specifically. And then we also have a goal to give at least $50 million each round to tribal entities, and then at least award at least one project in each of our 8 geographic areas each round. And I'll go over those in the next slide. But before doing that, I do just want to note that none of these goals are mutually exclusive. So, for example, if you had a project that is, identified as a transit-oriented development, but is also in a disadvantaged community, that project would count towards both goals for project awards. Okay, next slide. Okay, perfect. So this is the geographic areas that I mentioned in the previous slide. I'll give you all just a moment to find your county and which geographic area it falls under. Again, we award at least one in each geographic area. At least that's our goal. And the geographic areas are Central Coast, Coastal Southern California, Inland Southern California, North State and Sierras, Sacramento area, San Diego area, San Francisco Bay Area, and the San Joaquin Valley. And that's it for project award goals. I think I will pass it back to Lisette now for some information about our guidelines changes this round.
Thanks, Ella, so much. Yes, I'm going to first go over the timeline. So for round 10, we actually have, it's going to be the shortest timeline in AHSC's history. So the goal is that we wanted to make awards by December 2026. And for that reason, we're doing like an accelerated 12-month timeline. The draft guidelines were released on December 19th. And then you all are able to provide comments to the guidelines up until the 23rd at midnight. From there, we anticipate the guidelines will be adopted at the council meeting. And we're looking at NOFA, an application workbook release for early March, with applications being received in May and then reviewed between May and November. In terms of the proposed draft guideline that was shared, as you hopefully saw, the guidelines have very, very minimal changes from round 9. There's no changes proposed to the general overview, assistance limits, eligible uses of funds, threshold, legal requirements, reporting requirements, or any of the main definitions. A lot of the edits that were made were formatting, items to have greater clarity and streamlining the application process and language, ensuring consistent terminology. The reason that we're focusing on these minimal changes is in order to meet that accelerated timeline for this round. In the summary of key changes document that was also posted along with the draft guidelines, there were two items that were noted in the key changes but were not implemented as edits in the draft guidelines. The reason was that these were items that were still being discussed and considered. The first, which is noted there, is that we were considering the removal of a distinction between transit-oriented development and integrated connectivity project for those two project areas. As noted before, there are three project areas as defined by the AHSC program. And we had been doing internal analysis showing that this distinction was not necessarily the most helpful or necessary. The reason that this was put in place was to ensure more diversity in terms of applicants and having a balance between these two types of project areas. But unfortunately, with the accelerated timeline, we felt this would be a significant change for applicants and the applicant review process, and thus will not be implementing it in this round since there isn't sufficient time to make the changes or edits. We also felt that these two project area distinctions is not it's not hampering against any or creating any negative impact. What we saw in looking at previous rounds is that it was pretty balanced between TOD and ICPs, regardless of this distinction. So seeing in how scoring and awards kind of panned out. So we decided we can retain it for this round and then reconsider it in round 11. The second major notation in the key changes was a potential change to the scoring criteria section 111. One thing that has been an ongoing discussion for AHSC is seeing how home ownership applicants can have a more streamlined application process and clarity, and trying to promote receiving more home ownership applicants for the AHSC program. So we discussed a couple of items, including revising or even creating a standalone home ownership workbook, and maybe clarifying some of the changes with regards to the scoring. So as noted in section 111, in previous rounds, rental affordable housing developments can earn up to 4 points if the applicant shows that all long-term funding is already committed. This includes permanent loans, grants, and operating subsidies, but excludes AHSC funds, tax-exempt bond allocations, and 4% or 9% tax credits. If the project uses bonds, a permanent lender must have committed to the bond financing. Funding is considered committed if it's already been awarded or if the department agrees if it will be reliably available. So that would remain unchanged for round 10, but what we're proposing for homeownership applicants is that they also demonstrate committed funding for all construction financing grants and subsidies, excluding the amount requested by the AHSC program. Assistance for capital expenditures would be deemed to be an considered evidence of funding commitment if it has been awarded to the project or if the department approves other evidence that the assistance will be reliably available. So effectively what we're doing here is removing the in the application, homeownership applicants will not have to report on permanent sources of funding. This is because homeownership applicants, it doesn't make sense to include or list what the sale proceeds are, as this is an estimate and not what we're trying to get at in terms of committed funding. So it's to clarify and be more accurate to how homeownership should report their financing. So sale proceeds would only be relevant to pay off the construction loan, but would have been listed as a permanent source previously. So other sources would need to be demonstrated to commit as committed in order to receive the 4 points. So that would be a change that's reflected in the applicant workbook to streamline and make that clear. And now I'll hand it over to Carb to talk about the benefits calculator tool.
Morning, everyone. I'm Elena Bompieri with the California Air Resources Board, and my group at CARB is called California Climate Investments. We have a connection to this program through the funding source, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is supplied in turn by the Cap and Invest program. That gives us a connection to AHSC and imbues AHSC with a set of expectations around quantifying where possible the estimated greenhouse gas emissions reductions of funded projects, and also ensuring that a minimum percentage of funding is going to priority populations in the state of California. And so to meet those goals, CARB has a relationship to the program, and we use tools to quantify these estimated emissions reductions and also get at priority population benefits. For those who are maybe applying to AHSC from last year or maybe a few years ago, I have some nice news for you, which is that we're not making any proposed changes to our quantification methodology and calculator tool. Given the short window, we felt like this was not the most opportune time to make big changes and give folks time to digest and reflect on those. However, please look at our methodology and tool, get acquainted with it, and feel free to give us some comments. We do have some time to make improvements to usability, clarify questions, and so those sorts of like clarifying improvements we are interested in making with the time that we have. And I'll get to that at the end. If you want to review our quantification methodology and tool, these are housed on CARB's website. This PowerPoint presentation will be shared, but these links can be found on our website and are often hyperlinked through SGC's AHSC page. Let's go to the next slide. So to just give an overview of the purpose of the tool and the methodology behind it, again, its goal is to quantify where possible the estimated emissions reductions and other co-benefits of AHSC funded projects. And the way we go about this is we try to apply a uniform standard across our programs, which is that the methodology is project specific. So it takes project specific attributes, and those attributes inform the model's output on estimated emissions reductions. We use standard methodologies and empirical approaches and relatively conservative estimates across all of our methodologies. For example, AHSC, which funds transportation projects, uses a methodology that is also in place on other transportation programs that we fund. So if you are working with a partner, say a transit agency that has applied for the LC-TOP program, which funds transportation infrastructure, they will be familiar with the tool that is embedded in AHSC's calculator tool, as it uses the same backend set of assumptions and interface as the tool for that program. So we try to create a consistent universe of tools and methodologies. To basically be able to come up with estimates for the emissions impacts of our programs, which we report annually to the legislature as part of the conditions of this funding source, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Next slide, please. So presently we have 4 broad categories of projects that we can quantify emissions for. The first is the affordable housing development itself. The second is public transportation infrastructure, including things that are not hard costs what's the term I'm looking for? Infrastructure costs, I guess, per se, like fare subsidies, transit passes. We also can quantify the impacts of shared mobility projects, including new bike lanes, car sharing programs, van pool programs, micromobility, pedestrian services, including improvements to walkways and safety improvements for intersections. And then the last category we have quantification for is solar PV systems. And what we quantify there is solar kilowatt hours expected to be produced by the PV system on a building in excess of whatever is required at the minimum by Title 24, which sets solar production minimums for new multifamily housing in California. Now let's go to the next slide. So I encourage you to have a look at our quantification methodology and tool and to reach out to us if you have questions or would like to offer any feedback, or if you see something and say, hey, I think this could be clarified, or could usability be improved in a way around this? This is a little hard to navigate. We love that type of feedback. It helps us, it helps others. So please reach out to us. Our email is ggrfprogram@arb.ca.gov. Although we have a small window to accept feedback, given our expedited timeline this year, we love to hear feedback at any time and keep it on hand to reflect on every time we have a window to make improvements to our tools. So we'd love to hear from you. And please reach out with questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena, so much. And I'll hand it over to Justin to talk about next steps and timeline.
Great. Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Justin DeWale. I'm program analyst at SGC. Just a reminder, our public comments on our draft guidelines are due on the 23rd by 11:59 p.m. So that is this Friday. So if you do want to leave a public comment for us to consider when we're updating our guidelines, please send us a message or a letter to our inbox, ahsc@sgc.ca.gov. You can also email us there if you have any questions about the process or the program. Please keep updated on our website, sgc.ca.gov, to see past and current AHSC guidelines, to read more about our supplemental materials, the quantification methodology, past awards. We're also working on getting a dashboard of all of our funded projects, so that will be up there on the website to look at soon as well as the recording of this workshop for your reference. You can request technical assistance if you're applying for round 10. We offer cost-free technical assistance to any applicant that is interested in that. So please visit our website if you would like to request that.
And maybe Justin, sorry, jump in for a second. Just a
Sure.
clarifying point on the text. Anyone can apply, so this is an open application for anyone that's interested, but unfortunately there is limited resources, so there is a sort of selection process with that, but we try our best to make it as available to everyone as possible.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay. Oh, and sorry, the TA workshop. We are going to host a TA workshop on February 10th at the SACOG offices located in Sacramento. So do attend that if you would like to. And a reminder to sign up as well for our e-lists, our e-blasts, if you have not yet, so you can keep updated on all of our updates as we move through round 10. And with that, I think we can move into the Q&A portion. So if you would like to ask a question verbally, please use the raise hand feature, and we'll do our best to call on you in the order that your hand was raised. And And then, as many of you have already been doing, you're also welcome to use the type of question using the Q&A feature. We'll continue to answer those, and after the verbal questions, we'll lift up some of those for everyone's benefit. So with that, thanks very much, and we'll move into Q&A now.
Thanks, Justin. Was just giving it a moment. I don't see any hands raised at the moment, so we can pause for a little bit. But if no hands raised, we can review some of the Q&A. Yeah, it looks like no hands raised so far. So maybe we can just review some of the key questions that were typed into the chat.
Okay, yes. So we had a question from Ariel. Do applicants need to have land use ownership for a multifamily affordable housing development or an option to purchase agreement in place? What would be acceptable under these guidelines in order to begin raising funds through AHSC and the other programs mentioned? Tarsi answered, applicants need to show they have site control. This can be demonstrated in several different ways. Would suggest reading the definition of site control in the guidelines. Whichever way you are showing site control, it does need to be in place at the time of application. Another question from Ariel, for nonprofits developing multifamily affordable housing, what are the guidelines and processes involved with applying for federal tax credits for these projects and the timeline involved? And the answer is AHSC is not directly connected to federal tax credits. We are distinct from that program. However, we always do our best to try and align with the tax credits timeline because most of our applicants do also seek federal tax credits. You should refer to the state treasurer's website, CTCAC, for further information about the tax credits, the application process there, and the timeline there. Please confirm whether qualifying projects must be fully entitled. Please refer to section 103.1 F3, which provides you with the requirements related to CEQA and approvals for the AHD, HRI, and STI funding components. Section 103.1 F4 details what is needed to demonstrate local approvals and entitlements. Reach out if you have any additional questions. We will be sharing a recording of this meeting, yes, along with the slide deck.
Justin, I was going to jump in just for a quick second.
Sure.
Just wanted to also open up to see if anyone might have specific feedback with regards to our disadvantaged communities criteria for the AHSC program. So this is a very broad ask, but this is something we just want to ensure that the public has the option to be able to comment and give feedback on this. If you all believe the criteria is working, if any recommended changes, there isn't necessarily any proposed changes for round 10. But just a flag that we wanted to open up in case anyone has particular comments around the disadvantaged communities DAC criteria. This could be in the Q&A, or if anyone wants to come off mute, you're welcome to add comments. Or even if you're intending to write a public comment letter, this would be well received, any feedback on what's working, not working. Thank you.
Um, there's a question here. How do we know if our project is in a disadvantaged community? That is based on a tool called CalEnviroscreen. So I think we provide a link to that in our guidelines. But you can essentially type in an address or a coordinate all across the state into the CalEnviroscreen tool and find out if your project is in a disadvantaged community. And that designation is based on a number of criteria, which you can read about on their website on CalEnviroscreen 4.0.
I also
Um,
just put the link to CalEnviroscreen in the response to that Q&A, just so everybody knows.
Great, thanks. Let's see, let me pick up some more written questions here. If you're looking at sustainable building materials, i.e. mass timber, would there be a potential points benefit to that? In which scoring category would it be reflected? This isn't necessarily an explicit part of our scoring for the program. That said, within the narrative scoring section for climate adaptation and community resilience, there is an opportunity for projects to highlight green building methods and certifications. If we install a bigger solar PV system that far exceeds Title 24, excuse me, does that reduce GHG emissions? With the way the GHG methodology is currently set up, yes, we take the expected uh, kilowatt hours. I believe that's that acronym is. Elena, correct me if I'm wrong. The expected kilowatt hours produced in excess of the minimum required by Title 24 and estimate its GHG emission reduction by assuming it is displacing energy consumption by fossil fuel sources. Um, okay, let's see. How many applications were received and funded in the last round? Do you have a sense if this fast application cycle will be more or less subscribed? With the scarcity of funds in the multifamily suite of programs in the 2026 calendar year, the expectation would be that this round will be just as competitive and oversubscribed. Round 7 had 42 applications with $1.4 billion requested. Round 8 had 45 applications requesting 1.4 billion, and round 9 had 46 applications requesting 1.7 billion. The TA workshop in February will be in person only. However, the TA team is also developing a TA workshop in Southern California, specifically Orange County. So look out for more information on that. Are there scoring advantages if you pursue modular construction? There isn't a specific scoring aspect that takes modular into account. However, if modular construction offers certain sustainability or green building benefits, it is possible that you could use the climate adaptation and community resilience narrative scoring section to highlight the modular construction's green building benefits. And then, oh, we just have a note at the bottom here, which is good to lift up. Round 10 NOFA, the round 10 NOFA will have about $550 million of auction proceeds available, which were accrued from 2024 to 2025. I think that covers all of them. Oh, we have a couple live questions that are being type answered. Why is there why is there less funding available this round? Brienne, I saw you were answering that one. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I figure since you're calling it out, I might as well just answer it live. So we are funded by the Cap and Invest program, which is essentially like a stock market or like public market, right? So it varies from quarter to quarter or year to year what those auction proceeds are. So for the last few years, like I showed in that prior slide, we were consistently seeing 750 million. But this year the market is telling us differently. And ultimately, the Cap and Invest program would have, if it's working properly, it will decrease over time because we're hoping that corporations use less carbon. So yeah, so it is a little bit less this year. This is also still just an estimate. So when the NOFA actually goes out, we'll have the more accurate answer. But yeah, it just changes from year to year based on those auction proceeds.
Thank you so much, everyone, for all of these great questions, feedback, comments. We're seeing no more open questions or hands being raised, so I think we can go ahead and end the meeting. Just a reminder still, if anyone would like to send public comments to our AHSC inbox, the deadline to do so is the 23rd by midnight. And thank you to our panelists for the presentation and for everyone else for participating and joining. I hope you have a good rest of the day. And yes, seeing the last comment, we will be sending notification of the recording once it's publicly posted. Thank you.